Let me ask you something deep. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a criminal and seen kindness? Have you ever wondered how a person who's broken every law, every rule still turns around and does something so pure, so selfless, it leaves you speechless? What if I told you that science is just now discovering what the Quran revealed over 1400 years ago? That the human soul is not a fixed story but a battlefield of light and darkness, that even a man with blood on his hands might have a heart that whispers prayers in the silence of the night? Today we are diving into a truth that challenges everything you've ever believed about good and evil, right and wrong. This is not a story about excuses. This is a story about redemption, about what scientists are now proving and what the Quran has always known, that inside the worst of us. So sit back, open your heart, because by the end of this video, you won't just see criminals differently. You might just see yourself differently. The duality of human nature is one of the most perplexing and powerful truths about who we are as people. We are not purely angels and we are not purely devils. We are not built only to rise or only to fall. Within each of us exists the capacity for incredible goodness and devastating harm, and that right there is where the mystery begins. The mystery that the Quran doesn't ignore, the mystery that science is now starting to understand, the mystery that society continues to wrestle with. When someone hears the word criminal, there is a mental image, a judgment, a label. But what happens when the same person who committed the crime also feeds the poor in secret, or cries at night because they know what they did was wrong, or stands in the shadows protecting someone else even while wearing chains? Do we reduce a soul to one moment? Do we define an entire journey by a single fall? The Quran tells us something different. It tells us that inside every soul is a battle, and that battle is between the self that commands evil and the self that recognizes right from wrong. What science today refers to as dual process theory, the idea that we operate with both fast impulsive instincts and slow rational judgment, is something the Quran addressed long before. The Quran introduces the concept of the nafs in stages. Nafs al-lamara, the commanding self; nafs al-lawama, the self-reproaching soul; and nafs al-mutmaina, the soul at peace. These are not just poetic ideas. They represent levels of human conscience and behavior that mirror the findings of modern psychology. The commanding self seeks desires, pleasure, revenge, power, often without concern for morality. This is where many crimes originate, when the impulse overrides the reason, when pain and poverty, trauma and rage explode in acts we regret later. But that's not where the story ends, not according to the Quran. There is something divine in the fact that the Quran speaks directly to the sinner, directly to the broken, directly to the one who made a mistake. And not with condemnation, but with a door, a wide open door of return. Because what matters in the Quran is not just who you are right now, but who you strive to become. A criminal is not forever a criminal. That is the core truth behind the duality of our nature. One action does not define a lifetime. One decision, however terrible, does not seal the fate of the soul unless the person chooses to remain in that state. The Quran gives countless examples. People who were once destroyers of good, but who became champions of mercy. Take the example of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Before Islam, he was a fierce opponent of the Prophet, willing to take up arms against him. He was known for his anger, his strength, and his opposition. But something shifted in him. One verse, one moment, one confrontation with the truth broke the chains of his ego. He wept, he changed, he submitted, and became one of the greatest leaders in Islamic history. That is not just a story, that is a case study in transformation, in human duality, in redemption. A criminal became a saint. The oppressor became the protector, not because he erased his past, but because he changed his path. Today, psychologists and neuroscientists are slowly catching up to this spiritual truth. They talk about how trauma rewires the brain, how childhood neglect, systemic oppression, or unresolved pain can lead a person to act in destructive ways. But they also talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself, to heal, to rewire. That too is a modern scientific echo of an ancient truth. Because the Quran has always taught that change is possible, that within the same human who steals, lies, or harms can also be the one who gives, speaks truth, and heals others. Think about this. The Prophet Muhammad once told the story of a man who gave water to a thirsty dog, and because of that one act of compassion, God forgave his many sins. A simple act, a moment of mercy, that's all it took. Because Allah saw the heart behind the action. And perhaps that man had done terrible things. Perhaps he had a past no one wanted to remember. But Allah remembered the good, even if it was hidden inside layers of darkness. That's the duality, that's the paradox, that's the miracle of the human soul. And it gets even deeper when you realize how often we hide parts of ourselves from the world. The man the world calls a criminal might be the one who cries hardest at night. The woman society rejects as a failure might be the one praying hardest in secret. The people we dismiss may be the ones closest to God in ways we cannot measure. Because goodness isn't always loud, it doesn't always wear a badge, it doesn't always speak in holy language. Sometimes it shows up in silent sacrifices, in kindness done when no one is watching. In the moment a man on death row bows his head and begs for forgiveness, no one believes he deserves, but God hears it. There is a verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 228:6. Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. That's not just about tendencies, about inclinations, about temptations. Some people struggle more than others, not because they're worse, but because their burden is heavier. And yet, they keep walking, they keep trying. The man who fights his criminal tendencies every day, even if he fails, might be more beloved to God than the man who never struggled at all. And this flips our entire idea of judgment. It challenges us to look deeper, to see the soul behind the skin, the journey behind the judgment, the battle behind the behavior. Because sometimes the criminals of this world are the prophets of their own redemption stories. And the Quran is not just a book of laws, it is a book of mercy, of healing, of psychological depth, of understanding what it means to be human with all our flaws and all our potential. Science says we are not static beings, that our behaviors are shaped by environment, by chemistry, by memory, but also by choice. The Quran agrees. It says in Surah Shamshir 91:7 and 10, and by the soul and he who proportioned it and inspired it with discernment of its wickedness and its righteousness, he has succeeded who purifies it, and he has failed who instills it with corruption. That verse speaks of the internal struggle. It's real, it's raw, and it applies to everyone, even the one the world calls a criminal. The moment we write someone off, we cancel their possibility of growth in our minds. But God never does that. The Quran never does that. As long as breath remains in the body, the door remains open. This is not leniency, it's divine justice. It's knowing that only God sees the full picture, Only God knows the secrets of the heart. Only God knows whether the man with blood on his hands also has tears in his eyes. Real tears, painful tears, the kind of tears that say, I never wanted this. The kind of tears that mark the beginning of a return. And here is where it gets truly powerful. The people who have seen darkness up close, the ones who have walked through crime, punishment, regret, those are the same people who, if transformed, can become beacons of light for others. Because they speak with experience, because they know what it means to fall and rise, because they carry both warnings and wisdom in their eyes. That is why some of the greatest leaders were once broken men. Some of the most sincere guides were once blind. The Quran doesn't erase their past. It embraces it, it uses it. It turns their wounds into weapons of healing for others. That's why we can never be quick to judge a man's worth by his record. Because a man's record might be stained, but his heart may still be pure or trying to become pure. And that effort, that fight, that attempt to crawl out of sin and toward light might mean more in the divine court than a lifetime of comfort and clean hands. Because sometimes those with clean hands never did the work, they never fought, they never bled for their own transformation. The duality of human nature is not a flaw, it's a feature. It's the theater where choice plays out. And that's what makes life meaningful. That's what gives weight to our actions. That's what gives value to the good that emerges from unexpected places. So if a criminal becomes a good person, don't be surprised. Be grateful. Because that transformation is the very proof that the Quran is true, that God's mercy is real, that science, psychology, and spirituality are all converging on one truth, that we are all complex, layered, evolving souls. And if even one heart, one soul can rise from darkness into light, then the Quran is not just a book of rules. It is a manual for miracles. Hidden inside broken men are righteous seeds, just waiting for someone or something to water them. And sometimes that water comes in the form of one verse, whispered in the dark. Sometimes it comes from a scientist's discovery. Sometimes it comes from a prayer we don't even remember saying. But when it comes, it reminds us we are not just what we have done, we are what we are willing to become. In the end, what defines a person is not their past, not their mistakes, not even their crimes, but their fight to rise above them. The Quran speaks to that fight, it honors that struggle, and it opens a door no matter how far someone has fallen. Science now echoes what the Quran revealed centuries ago, that transformation is possible, that the mind can heal, and that the soul can return to its creator with light, even if it walked through darkness. We must stop labeling people as forever broken, because sometimes the people we cast away are the very ones closest to God in ways we can't see. A criminal with a heart crying for mercy may be more righteous than the one who never sinned but lacks compassion. That is the power of divine mercy. That is the miracle of human potential. And that is what truly shocks, not just what scientists discovered in the Quran, but what the Quran has always known about the human soul. Thank you for giving your time, your mind, and your heart to this message. May you always see people not just for who they were, but for who they can become. May you never stop believing in change, in mercy, and in the silent, unseen miracles unfolding every day in hearts around the world, maybe even your own. Stay blessed, stay hopeful, and may your journey always be toward the light. Good luck.